Congratulations, I hope you're all awesome. We have the new Leviathan preamp pedal from Redseven Amplification out of Italy. This one is a tube preamp with a digital back end. You've got various foot switches, MIDI functionality, a stereo effects loop, power amp simulation, IR loading, and 2 independent channels on here. Furthermore, there's a built-in boost and a headphone output on here. I'm really happy that more companies are adopting this form factor for their hybrid solutions, where you have the best parts of a tube amplifier or preamplifier with the best parts of modern digital technology like IR loading, power amp simulation, the ability to go direct to front of house and to a separate power amp and cab on here. This one has MIDI control of the built-in presets and channels in there. Furthermore, there's a USB connection so that you can hook it up to a software editor and customize things like the IRs, the boost. There's a stereo widener effect in there and MIDI implementation as well. We're going to take a look at all of that, and we will be hearing all of the tones direct today with no post-processing on the guitar. So what you hear is what you get. Thank you to Redseven for sending this out to me so that I could make this video. Let's go. Now, Redseven did make a really limited number of Leviathan preamps quite a few years ago, and those have been selling for massively inflated prices used. So I can certainly see why they decided to not only bring back the Leviathan preamp as a pedal, but to do it using this form factor, which bakes in the best of modern digital technology, which is widely available. Again, it's one of the ways that we are living in the best of times when it comes to guitar gear. The controls on the Leviathan preamp are really straightforward. You've got independent volume, 3-band EQ and gain controls for channel 1 and channel 2. You can foot switch between the channels with dedicated foot switches here. You can kick in the boost with the left foot switch on here. There are some trim pots on the side of the pedal that let you set the gain and tone for the built-in boost. And if you're using the boost in the post or pre and post mode, which you can set up with the software, we'll talk about that a little bit later, you've got your solo volumes over here, which will let you set the overall extra bit of volume that you're going to get out of the boost on there. So I've currently got the boost set up in a pre and post setup, meaning it will hit the front end of the preamp to give me more gain, but it will also raise up the overall volume as a true solo boost on there. You've got a little button here which will let you scroll through the 3 presets on there. So the presets will save per channel the IRs used, the power amp simulation used, whether the boost is active or not, whether the noise gate is active or not, and whether the stereo widening effect is activated. So I'm going to be using the same IR across all the presets at the moment. What we will hear between different presets are different power amp simulations coming from the pedal on here. I'm going to start by just dialing in channel 1 for a classic rock style sound. To my ears, channel 1 has slightly more of a vintage voicing, whereas channel 2 is straight up modern chugga chugga madness, even with the gain below noon. We'll hear that in a second, but I'm using the Plexi power amp sim on channel 1 at the moment, and I'm using the Leviathan KT88 power amp sim for channel 2. We'll hear it with and without the boost. Then we'll go through a couple of different power amp sim combinations on here, and I'm going to twist a bunch of knobs and maybe play a different guitar, but for now we use the DGT because it can do so much. I'm on the humbucker mode at the moment. 2 can get super tight and aggressive on there, and the EQ controls are really powerful. You could hear the difference between turning the treble from, say, noon up to around 2 o'clock had quite a marked difference on there. I guess it's something that wasn't designed in the late 70s or early 80s, so the EQ is probably designed to actually do something on there, which does take some getting used to if you're used to, say, playing old Marshalls or old Mark series amps on there, where sometimes you need extreme settings. I feel like Redseven understand that guitar players are like inherently conservative with where we set knobs, and we normally set everything at noon. So you can see I just kind of ended up with almost everything at noon, and the gain turned up there, and I was really enjoying it on the second channel. Having that Plexi Power Amp sim with channel 1 on there as well really gave it a vintage vibe. What I want to do is hear channel 1 with the Plexi Power Amp sim, then I'll swap over to the next preset. So it's going to keep the same IR on there. I could change the IR if I wanted to, but I'm going to keep it consistent there. And we're going to swap over to the Leviathan preamp model on there. So channel 1 over here, again, set up for like a classic rock thing with the DGT. We've got the Plexi Power Amp, then we'll go over to the Redseven Leviathan Power Amp simulation. So I was using that same Power Amp sim on channel 2 previously, and it's definitely got this kind of bouncy feel to it. I really like the low end response. The Power Amp simulations on here, having just multiple Power Amp sims itself is a really nice option on there to change up not just the tone, but the feel. On the next preset over here, channel 1, I've assigned the Cali EL84 Power Amp sim on there. So let's have a listen to the difference between the Redseven Leviathan Power Amp sim and then the Cali. Easy to hear the difference there. Let's do the same thing with channel 2. This time we're going to go from the Leviathan Power Amp sim to the D100 Power Amp sim to the 100 watt Plexi Power Amp sim across the 3 different presets. So again, each preset is going to save the IR, the Power Amp sim, the boost, the gate, and whether you have the widener on, and you can set those up to be different on each channel. So basically the hierarchy is you have your presets, and then you have channel 1, channel 2, and the boost amongst each of those. So really, you have 6 sounds on here available. USB-C cable from the Leviathan preamp to your computer will allow you to use the free Void X Control software. Not only can you manage your presets and channels per preset, but you can set up the built-in IRs, and this ships with a bunch of great sounding factory IRs. You can even run 2 IRs per preset, either as independent channels or in a summed setup there. You've got the different power amp simulations available on here. So there's a bunch of Redseven power amp models in here, like the Leviathan in there, a Hybrid 100, and more classic power amps like the Plexi 50 and 100 on there. You've got the option as well to set up the boost as a pedal style boost in the pre-setup, a volume boost in post or a combination of pre and post. So you can get more saturation and more volume on there. Again, this is per channel, per preset on here. You can even get into the advanced settings on the noise gate and tweak the attack, release, and hysteresis on there. Furthermore, there is a stereo widening tool available on here if you are playing in stereo. So at the moment, I've got these factory EVH IRs in here. I'm running them in stereo and I've tried to balance out the relative volumes of them. I'll let you hear the difference between stereo and sum together. Using it summed together is going to be like using an IR mixer or like blending two different microphones on the same cab in this setup. And we very quickly heard the difference between running the boost purely as a pre-gain, let's say saturation boost, the way you would use like a tube screamer or an SD1 in front of a gainy amp, using it in post so that we're getting a proper volume boost. My personal preference there is to have the pre and post setup. So not only can you add more gain and saturation to the front end of the preamp, but you can actually get a proper volume boost out of it. So if you wanted your solos to not only give you extra grease and gain on them, but to be louder than your rhythm guitar and to pop out in a mix, that's a great way to set that up. And I'm going to leave that over there. Before we have a listen to the power amp sim, I've gone back and loaded in one of my free IRs into both slots on here. So you can load up your own IRs onto this unit, set the individual volume. I'm running in stereo. I just want to have a listen to what the stereo widening tool does on here. That's a really nice option to have in there if you are playing in a stereo setup and you want to have a little bit of extra space on your guitar sound. That would be really nice as well if you're playing on in-ears, stereo in-ears, of course, so you can have the guitar not sound like it's coming out of the center of your nose and being able to adjust that. I'm fairly certain they're just using the classic Haas style delay in there with a really short delay on one channel, but it does the trick and it sounds really nice again in stereo in combination with the boost as a pre and post setup on there. You can get more volume and more gain, as I was saying before. Right, I'm going to disable the boost and the stereo widening in here. The noise gate, it's really handy being able to adjust the attack and release on here so you can cater it to your guitars. I should mention as well, the noise gate is set up in a sidechain setup. So the detector to the noise gate is being taken from the DI signal of the guitar that's going into the pedal, but the actual gate itself is placed after the preamp. This is Probably the optimal setup if you're playing high gain and you want really tight chugs but a natural feel on there. So I do appreciate that about the noise gate. But let's have a listen to the impact of the power amp sim on here. So we'll start out with the Leviathan power amp over here. I'll just go through all the different options. In fact, let's go over to channel 2 here just so I can have some more gain and some extended low end. That channel really does sound a lot more modern on here. So we'll start with the Leviathan power amp sim and I'll just go through all of them. It's going to change up the tone quite a bit. Power amp sim that you choose here is going to be an integral part of the overall tone. So I've actually gone through and set up a couple of different presets and channels on here, just using different variations on the power amp sim, along with where I've got the boost set up, but mostly the power amp sim. So it's the same cab IR. It's obviously the same settings on the individual pedals on the channel there. Let's just play through and have a listen to the overall impact on the sound. I think my personal favorite combinations on there are having the Plexi 100 power amp sim with channel 1 for more of a classic Marshall style feel, and then having channel 2 set up with the Leviathan KT88 power amp sim in there for more of a modern tight high gain sound. We just heard some really nice chimey sounds out of channel 1 on the neck pickup of a Strat, but I think my favorite combo with the Leviathan is my PRS SC245 in drop C. This guitar can be a little bit fussy with high gain amplifiers, just the way it's voiced. Being a shorter scale guitar in drop C, it can get a little bit dark sounding. I often need to use an external boost. If you go and listen to Ragdoll's Back to Zero album, nearly the whole album has at least a couple of layers of a boosted dual rectifier on there with this guitar, and we were using a clone on there to get that extra little bit of spice out of the guitar into the amp. But I think just the way channel 2 is voiced on here with that Leviathan power amp sim and my IR, and the knobs nearly all almost at noon, just kind of works with the guitar. It's one of the few preamps that I've plugged into that I've immediately gone, yet I can plug this guitar straight into it and use it unboosted. We will, of course, hear it boosted as well. So let's just hear it at the settings that I've got it. This is one of those things where I don't know, you just feel that synergy with a guitar and an amplifier sometimes. Okay, let's push this a little bit more. I'm going to pull out some mid-range. I'm going to boost up a little bit of bass and treble along with the gain, and we'll hear the different power amp sims that we heard at the start. So it will be the Leviathan, then the D100, then the Plexi on there, boosted and unboosted. If you want any more information about the Leviathan preamp, I will link you to the Redseven website in the video description. You can also grab my free IR there if you'd like. Big thank you to the Redseven team for sending this one out to me so that I could make some noise with it. Like I was saying, that combination of this guitar, channel 2 on there, and the built-in boost, along with the built-in noise gate, power amp simulation, and the extra little features in there are really well thought out. It's got its own voice. It's not particularly trying to sound, say, like a Fender Clean and a Marshall Crunch or anything like that. It's definitely not a generic sounding preamp. It's got its own character on each of the channels, along with the power amp sim voices that they have chosen. Plenty of decent sounding built-in IRs in there. The stereo double tracker or the widening effect is a really nice touch on there. And another point of difference is the true stereo effects loop on there. So if you wanted to put, say, a Boss SDE 3000 in there and run those two together and not have to go through a bunch of extra cabling on there so that you can use the outputs of the Redseven or the outputs of the delay on there, you could run, a VP4 or an H90 in there and have a really great self-contained rig with a tube front end and a digital back end on there. I also like that they have included the option to just give you the preamp out on there. It's called the direct out. So you could run that to a power amp and a real cabinet. So you could do, I guess, what you do with a lot of modern modelers, where you could use this with the IRs and the power amp sim to go straight to front of house, but you could still run a power amp and cab on stage for your extra bit of trouser flapping volume on there. And that's something that I know a lot of people are using these days with direct solutions, so that especially the people at the front of the crowd can still hear all the elements of the live band. So I like that extra little touch on there. If you just wanted to use it as a preamp pedal without the digital back end, you can certainly do that. But yeah, I think multiple power amp sims, the stereo effects loop on there, and just the overall voicing of the preamp on there is going to appeal to a lot of people. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, go and play your guitars and make some noise. I'll see you then.